good evening in the United States, and good morning in China. On behalf of the US-Asia Institute, the organizer of today's event, as well as the Las Vegas Sands Corporation, the event's premier sponsor, welcome to the US-China Regional Dialogue on Hospitality, Tourism, and Cultural Exchange. We're so excited you could join us today, whether it's in person or online. My name is Rachel McKnight, and I co-chair the US-Asia Institute's Congressional Circle. It's an honor to work with the US-Asia Institute on their noble mission to recognize the importance of the US-China relationship, and I'm pleased to serve as your MC. This impressive forum is the second in a series of dialogues bringing together federal, state, and local officials, business representatives, and thought leaders from both the United States and China, with the goal of increasing communication and engagement at every level. Right now, we are in Las Vegas, and although physical travel between the United States and China is not possible at this time, please consider this dialogue a two-day virtual journey as you hear from speakers, join with viewers, and listen to stories from the United States, China, and beyond. We are pleased to bring you an outstanding program featuring passionate and renowned individuals who are deeply involved in the US-China relationship. Their presentations and conversations will be informative, interesting, and timely as they examine areas of mutual interest and concern through open and honest discussion. Their insights over the next 2 days will be invaluable in forging a path forward for US-China tourism, hospitality, and exchange programs. So let's get this exciting event started. To open our program, I welcome Mr. Andy Aboud, Senior Vice President of Government Relations for Las Vegas Sands, a world leader in developing and operating integrated resorts with properties in the United States, China, and Singapore. And Andy has been a driving force in that effort. Please join me in welcoming him to the podium.
Thank you, Rachel. Welcome, everybody. I'm Andy Aboud, Senior Vice President of Government Relations for Las Vegas Sands. Thank you for joining us this evening and this morning, both in person and virtually, for this very important dialogue. Las Vegas Sands is very proud to sponsor our second in the series of US-China dialogue meetings in conjunction with our partner, the US-Asia Institute. You will hear more about Las Vegas Sands during this session from our Chairman and CEO, Rob Goldstein. But for those of you who are not familiar with our company, we are the world leader in developing and operating integrated resorts with properties in the United States, China, and Singapore. We offer some of the most outstanding hospitality in the world, and so we are delighted to partner with USAI to host this dialogue on tourism, hospitality, and cultural exchange. We've enjoyed our relationship with the US-Asia Institute over the years, providing financial and other support to assist the Institute in strengthening the important bonds and building an understanding between the American and Chinese people. Giving back to the communities in which we operate is a core value for Las Vegas Sands, and our partnership with the US-Asia Institute is a key component of our company's corporate social responsibility program, along with our support with the China Development Research Foundation to address rural nutrition needs in China, hospitality training programs, sports, and support for organizations that promote positive engagement between the United States and China. In 2019, Las Vegas Sands had the pleasure of hosting the first official United States congressional delegation to visit Macau. This delegation, featuring members of Congress from the Western United States, had the opportunity to tour our properties in Macau and learn about Macau's unique economy and role in promoting trade and investment. The goal of these US-China Dialogue series is to draw focus on how the US and China economies are intertwined and how engagement creates jobs and opportunities for Americans. This dialogue series will reach across the United States and China and is designed to showcase why communication and positive engagement between our two countries benefits American businesses, workers, and communities. I would like to thank Glenn Lauke, chairman of the U.S. Asia Institute, along with our president, Mary Sue Bissell, Rachel McKnight, for making today's program and this series possible. We are looking forward to an engaging and productive dialogue this evening and tomorrow. Now I'll turn the program over to Glenn Lauke.
Thank you, Andy. That was tremendous. And I think that Las Vegas Sands has shown tremendous leadership in the U.S.-China relationship. And Andy's been at the forefront of that. So we appreciate that. It's clear to see the passion both you and the Las Vegas Sands Corporation have for this important subject matter, and why we're so pleased you have taken on this role. Our next speaker is someone I've come to know and respect over the years. Mr. Glenn Lauke is chairman of the U.S. Asia Institute. Glenn and his family have been at the forefront of U.S.-China relations since the founding of USAI in 1979. Now, more than 40 years later, Glenn has not only continued that legacy as chairman, but has propelled it forward, making sure that the U.S. Asia Institute has broadened its reach as its leadership. And please join me in welcoming USAI's chairman and my friend and mentor, Glenn Lauke.
Thank you, Rachel. Ambassador Chin, Congresswoman Titus, Minister Zhang, Mr. Goldstein, Mr. Aboud, honored guests, and all of you participating in person or virtually. On behalf of the U.S. Asia Institute, I would like to thank you for being part of this important discussion on tourism, hospitality, and international exchange. Though China and the United States may have significant disagreements on various issues, people-to-people engagement encouraged by tourism, hospitality, and international exchange presents many opportunities along with the challenges. This symposium will explore the issues and the possibilities. We are indeed fortunate to have experts from across the spectrum to provide insight into the U.S.-China relationship and the important role people-to-people connection and engagement plays in building understanding and trust. The U.S. Asia Institute believes strongly in the importance of dialogue as the foundation for expressing concerns, finding solutions, and keeping the lines of communication open. With this forum, the U.S. Asia Institute is proud to continue a new initiative launched in Lincoln, Nebraska this past May, the U.S.-China Dialogue Series. Underwritten by Las Vegas Sands, this series encourages continued engagement between the U.S. and China on a number of issues, with the first being agriculture and now hospitality, tourism, and international exchange. Events such as this will continue to be the mainstay of the U.S. Asia Institute's work, started 42 years ago to promote open and candid dialogue and understanding. We are delighted to be here in Las Vegas, Nevada for this discussion and are pleased to have so many joining us in person and virtually from around the globe. Thanks to each one of you and welcome.
Thank you, Glenn, for your leadership and for reminding us what we're here to accomplish over the next 2 days. I'd also like to recognize USAI's President, Mary Sue Bissell, who's here with us in person. She's been instrumental in the organization's success for more than 3 decades, during which she substantially advanced bilateral diplomacy and understanding. Now we have such an exciting starting lineup for you, and I'm so fortunate to introduce them to kick off our journey. They will be sharing their experiences as diplomats, business executives, premier thought leaders, and policymakers, and in doing so, give us an exclusive look into the past, present, and future of U.S.-China relations. I'm honored to welcome as our first speaker, His Excellency Gong, Ambassador to the United States from the People's Republic of China. Ambassador Qin recently arrived in Washington to assume this all-important post, for which he brings with him decades of leadership experience at the highest levels of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including a post in London, then returning to Beijing, where he ultimately served as Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs before becoming China's 11th ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Qin is speaking to us live from the Chinese Embassy in Washington, D.C., and we are truly honored to hear from him today. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador.
Chairman Glenn Lauke, Ms. Mary Sue Bissell, Mr. Robert Goldstein, members of Congress, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to attend this forum organized by the U.S.-Asia Institute. Today's forum is about tourism, hospitality, and the cultural exchange between China and the U.S., which are the foundation for the mutual understanding and the correct perception of the two peoples. I know that due to COVID-19, many of you have not been able to go to China for a while, and you want to catch up with the latest. There are so many new things going on in my country, but where shall I start? Well, maybe it's a good idea to share with you some buzzwords in China, from which you will know what is going on in China and what the Chinese people are thinking about and what they are doing. The first buzzword is 人民至上,生命至上, or people first, life first. This phrase was from China's fight against the pandemic, and it is rooted in Chinese history and reflects a deep concern for humanity. Over 2,000 years ago, Confucius raised the idea that people are the foundation of a country. The founding mission of the Communist Party of China is to pursue happiness for the people, and putting people at the center is a guiding principle of the CPC and a core value of socialism with Chinese characteristics. When COVID-19 hit China, we mobilized resources nationwide and launched an epic campaign to fight it. The whole country was united as one, with no palace left behind and no life given up. From a 30-hour-old baby to senior citizens of over 100 years old, no cost was spared to save a life, and all the treatment was free. Now the pandemic has been put under effective control in China, and the sporadic or cluster cases in a few regions were all curbed very quickly. Second, 逆行者, or heroes in harm's way, which refers to the everyday heroes who put their mission before their lives and made fearless sacrifices to fight the pandemic. There were medical professionals, military personnel, and firefighters who rose to the challenge on the front line and raced against time to save lives. There were construction workers who worked around the clock to build hospitals in less than 2 weeks. There were volunteer drivers who used their private cars to give free rides to patients and the medical staff. There were countless police officers, truck drivers, delivery persons, street cleaners, community workers who held on to their posts day and night to keep people's daily life up and running at a special time. Third, 躺平, or lie flat, which describes the youngsters who give up ambitions and do the bare minimum to get by. They are either trying to evade competition and lead a low desire life, or they just don't want to work and choose to live off their parents, like some boomerang kids in America. Lie flatters are either from well-off families, born with a silver spoon in mouth, or believe that whatever comes their way, they have basic medical insurance, pension, and unemployment subsidies to fall back on. This is totally different from previous generations who didn't have the luxury to lie flat because they had to tighten their belts and work hard to earn a living. At the same time, compared with older generations, youngsters nowadays face greater competition in employment, career, housing, and parenthood. To give you an idea of that, 10 million college graduates enter the job market every year. Some people think lying flat stands for a life philosophy of no worldly pursuits. Some take it as a passive choice in a fast-changing society. Some believe this is just to vent stress before they get going again. But more people don't approve the lie flatters, who they believe are just refined egoists. And the people have a greater respect for 逆行者, or heroes in harm's way. Fourth, 凡尔赛, or Versailles, originally from the palace of Versailles in France. The word was borrowed to refer to the self-claimed aristocratic spirit. In social media, it is used to label humble braggers who pretend to sound modest when they flaunt their rich and unique lifestyle. For example, some people want to brag about their new villa. Oh, I hate to move, but I have to, because you only get your own supercharger for Tesla in a private garage. Some people show off their luxury travel. Weeping tonight at Victoria Harbor will save my tears for Paris next time. These are typical examples of humble bragging, which are usually followed by plenty of formal comments on social media. Fifth, 内卷, or innovation. At latest buzzword, it means irrational or involutionary competition. Because of it, people feel burnout and individual efforts are made less worthwhile. In a highly competitive era, people tend to think success is more important than personal growth. With fierce competition between students and between parents, and the chains of contempt found in everything from after-school classes to school district housing, no one can stay immune from the arms race in education. Out of anxiety or vanity, tiger parents would keep pushing their kids to learn more and take more after-school classes, and they would bend over backwards to help their kids succeed. Training schools have taken advantage of this to grow widely. As a result, innovation intensifies and education becomes a profitable industry. Some elementary pupils have a schedule more packed than high school students, with their subjects so various that you cannot even imagine I still remember over 10 years ago, my weekends were also spent rushing my kid from one training school to another. And the courses he took ranged from math to physics. After a whole day of classes outside, there was a home tutor who came in the evening. And when the tutor session finished, I still needed to help him with his composition. In such an environment, both parents and the children get very tired. Parents' wallets empty, and there is no quality time with children to speak of. 6, 双减, or double reduction. This is a recent policy to address involution in education. It aims to reduce excessive homework load and after-school tutoring hours for students in compulsory education. With capital restricted in education sector, education will return to its original purpose. Children can have all-round development in school, and the personal growth will be considered more important than success. The double reduction policy has lessened students' academic burden and the peer pressure. They don't have to vie with each other in after-school classes anymore. They have more time for sports, play, and their real hobbies. But for parents, some may feel that their world is collapsing. They have spent all the money to get their kids ahead of others, and now they can't cram the kids anymore. Still, most parents feel that their world is lighting up. They don't have to get themselves so tired and their wallets emptied. And they don't have to be part of commercialization of education anymore. 7th, 饭圈, or celebrity fan clubs. To attract eyeballs, some celebrities used the internet to hype up themselves, and their fans crazily imitated their misbehaviors. As a result, some fans got confused with their identities, while others spent every penny they had in chasing their idols. Behind all these abnormalities is a chain of interests dominated by online platforms and the capital that supports them. The fan圈 culture reflects the excessive influence that commercialization plays in the entertainment industry. And the government is introducing measures to regulate this phenomenon. The buzzwords I shared with you today reflect the changing and unchanging elements in our values when China experiences rapid economic growth and profound social transformation. Socialism, with Chinese characteristics, requires both material progress and the cultural ethical advancement. We need to keep fine traditional values, uphold fairness and justice, and do not get lost in a market economy. In addition to rule of law, China also practiced rule of virtue. Then what is China's traditional virtue? It means a concern for the common good of humanity. It means, to quote a Chinese poem, how wonderful it would be if there could be tens of thousands of houses to shelter those in need, together with joy. Therefore, it is unacceptable if capital is allowed to seek profit and the monopoly at the expenses of public interests. Ladies and gentlemen, because of the pandemic, many of you have not been able to visit China for some time. What can we do about it? I would suggest, if you want to visit the Forbidden City, why not take a 3D virtual tour to feast your eyes? If you crave Chinese food, there are so many food blogs with luring pictures and videos that can indulge your eyes, though not your stomach. If you missed the shopping spree at the Beijing Silk Market, try live streaming shopping that can deliver whatever you buy right to your doorstep. If you want to practice your Chinese language skills with native Chinese, you can find help at interactive learning apps with both one-on-one learning and the group lessons readily available. But please keep in mind, don't share your credit card password with strangers. Chairman Mao Zedong once said, "He who has never been to the Great Wall is not a true man." When the pandemic is over, I would highly recommend you to visit China in person. Here are some tips. Don't forget to have your phone with you wherever you go, because scanning QR codes is more convenient when taking buses, high-speed trains, planes, or ships, or just riding a shared bike. You will also need your driver's license, because you can help yourself to rent a shared new energy car on the street. Don't take with you big cash notes, because from street vendors to shopping malls, people prefer e-payment, and you had better have payment apps ready in your phone. You probably cannot get change if you pay by cash. Last but not least, I don't recommend you Americans to go to Beijing Universal Studio or Shanghai Disneyland. There are simply too many Chinese people. Ladies and gentlemen, there's only so much that I can share with you today. To get a true multidimensional and panoramic view of China, I encourage you to go to China and get an immersive experience of my country. I hope that the pandemic will be over soon, so that you can go there for study, work, and fun. But by that time, you may find what I said today already out of date. Then I would suggest the US Asia Institute organize another event like today. And I would be very glad to offer you more tips. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Qin. That was really interesting, and we look forward to having you in person again soon and resuming travel between the United States and China. It means so much to all of us that you are here with us today, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon and working with you for years to come. Now we will hear from Mr. Zhang Xu, who serves as Vice Minister of Culture and Tourism for the People's Republic of China. After a career dedicated to advancing culture and society at the highest levels. Though the pandemic has put US-China exchanges and tourism on hold for now, Vice Minister Zhang values them both from the economic and diplomatic perspectives. It's that shared belief that has brought us all to this event and makes us so eager to hear from him now. Please join me in welcoming Vice Minister Zhang right now from Beijing.
尊敬的秦刚大使，尊敬的美亚学会主席、会长， 尊敬的各位联邦议员、州长、女士们、先生们，大家下午好。很高兴参加美亚学会主办的这次论坛。首先，请允许我代表中国文化和旅游部，给大家送去来自金秋北京的祝福。虽然隔着屏幕，我似乎能感受到拉斯维加斯论坛现场的热烈气氛。这次论坛是美亚学会中美系列对话中一次非常有意义的活动。我很遗憾不能到现场和大家面对面交流。在新冠肺炎疫情给各国人民的生活和交往带来极大影响的背景下，这次论坛的主题旅游和人文交流具有特殊的意义。回想1972年，沈阳杂技团作为新中国成立后第一个访美艺术团，在美国引起轰动，受到尼克松总统接见。费城交响乐团1973年来到中国，中美艺术家同台演奏的二泉映月、黄河、美丽的阿美利加等曲目，成为中美两国人民记忆中优美的旋律。40多年后，中美旅游和人文交流获得飞跃式发展，双方人员往来已从刚开始的每年几千人，发展到了疫情前每年超过500万人次。美国已成为中国第1大远程客源国和第5大旅游目的地国。2019年，中国游客给美国带来的收入超过300亿美元，在海外游客中排名第1。中国的欢乐春节、美丽中国等品牌活动在美国很受欢迎。仅在2020年1月至2月间，就有兰州歌舞团、大梦敦煌、上海芭蕾舞团天鹅湖、浙江少剧团的新春音乐会赴美演出。纽约花旗球场的天下华灯嘉年华活动吸引了超过20万人次的观众。中美作为最大的发展中国家和最大的发达国家，文化各具特色，旅游资源丰富，两国人民相互往来意愿很强，也从中受益。两国人民的密切交往，充分证明两国友好是互利双赢的选择。虽然新冠肺炎疫情给两国旅游和人文交流按下了暂停键，但两国人民加强交往的意愿没有变。两国关系发展也需要进一步的促进中美旅游和人文交流。前段时间，我见了上海迪士尼度假区总裁，他告诉我，上海迪士尼是全球迪士尼乐园中在疫情后第一个复开的，目前业绩很好，正在筹建新的园区。9月20日，北京环球度假区正式开业，第1天门票在1分钟内售罄，非常火爆。预计每年游客达到1200万人次。这2个例子说明，中美人民交往有强烈的意愿和巨大潜力。受疫情阻隔，很多美国朋友已经有段时间没有来中国。我借此机会把一些最新的数据和大家分享一下。今年7月1日，习近平主席庄严宣告，中国已全面建成小康社会。这是伟大的历史性成就，文化和旅游也做出了相应的贡献。2019年，国内旅游人数60.06亿人次，入境旅游人数1.45亿人次，出境旅游人数1.54亿人次。2021年上半年，国内旅游总人次达18.7亿，恢复到2019年同期的60%多。 在刚刚过去的中秋假期，国内旅游达8815.93万人次，按可比口径恢复到2019年中秋假期的87.2%。可以看出，中国的旅游市场正在逐步恢复。2020年末，全国共有文化市场经营主体20.89万家，从业人员160.91万人，营业收入9967.49亿元，共有博物馆5452个，接待观众5.2亿人次。全国列入联合国教科文组织人类非物质文化遗产代表作名录42项，位居世界第一。2022年，北京将举办冬季奥运会，成为首个举办过夏季奥运会和冬季奥运会的城市。大家会发现，中国每天都在发生新的变化。无论你是否来过中国，一个历史悠久又日新月异、文化多样又和谐共生的中国，始终等待你的重新发现和探索。今天，在座各位都是中美旅游和人文交流的亲历者和推动者。经过40多年的共同努力，我们取得了令人瞩目的成绩。2022年是尼克松总统访华50周年，为迎接这重要历史时刻，希望我们携起手来，再接再厉，继续书写两国人民友谊的新华章。这次论坛就是很好的契机，希望中美文化和旅游界人士可以通过这次论坛加强沟通、共商合作，谋划好后疫情时代中美旅游和人文交流。最后，我诚挚地邀请在座的美国朋友早日来中国访问，期待着我们下一次面对面的交流。预祝论坛取得圆满成功，谢谢大家。
Thank you for those thoughtful remarks, Vice Minister. Now, we are honored to welcome an individual who's in charge of one of the world's most iconic and recognizable hospitality brands. Mr. Rob Goldstein, Chairman and CEO of Las Vegas Sands, provides strategic direction to the company's global properties and is focused on furthering the company's efforts to be a good community partner around the world. As president and CEO, he's a business leader and a champion for maintaining the bilateral communications that forums like this one hope to enhance. He has certainly demonstrated that commitment through his support of these regional dialogues. We would not be here without him. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Rob Goldstein.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, and welcome to everyone here, whether you're here in person or virtually. Welcome to Las Vegas. Welcome to our forum. Mr. Ambassador, I want to thank you for your support and your direction. We're grateful you took the time this evening to speak with us. I also like to thank everyone, excuse me, our impressive roster of speakers and dignitaries we'll hear from this evening. Let me recognize and thank our co-host, the U.S. Asia Institute, who we're grateful for your support and direction. Thank you very much. The U.S.-China Dialogue session is the second in the series focused on hospitality, cultural exchange, and tourism. It was conceived to discuss commercial opportunities and workforce development. This is a challenging time, as we all know, in U.S.-China relations. It is only through dialogue and direct communication that we can explore common ground for the benefit of all parties. Let me give you an example of what I've experienced in this context. Our company is doing business for about 2 decades in Macau. We began this search for a license in the early 2000s, excuse me. And we've challenged, I guess, a lot of common held beliefs that we couldn't succeed in Macau. Many of our colleagues, Ron, thank you so much, cooperative spirit. Our projects Our 20 years in Macau have taught us a lot of things, but it's been an extraordinary experience for my colleagues, for myself. We've been very lucky, very fortunate to be part of the Macau experience and the Macau transition. And many questioned 20 years ago in this town whether US companies could succeed in Macau, and a lot of companies chose not to endeavor forward into Macau. But the incredible hospitality success story, which has become Macau, is unquestioned. It takes a government with a vision that enables the development companies such as ours to move forward and be successful. We found that government in the Macau government. There's an old Chinese proverb, which I've translated rather loosely. It says, even the most clever cook cannot prepare rice without rice. It took a government, it took a company, it took a vision to make Macau be what it is today. I entered the hospitality world about 40 years ago after law school, and I was on a trip to Hong Kong in 1981. And I heard so much about Macau, I ventured onto a ferry boat and went to see Macau. And it was astounding and eye-opening to me, this gaming-centric small place. It took about 50 minutes by ferry boat to get there. And it was an eye-opener. Gaming in that time was the sole business in Macau. There was nothing else, very small hotel footprint. Very little there in Macau to suggest you'd be there other than gambling. There were very few restaurants, very few hotel rooms, no business center, no convention, no retail shopping, no spa, no health club, no business center. It was a gaming focused entity, much like the city you're in today, Las Vegas was in 1980s and 90s. And that continued for a long time. And Macau's transformation really started to occur in 2000. In 2002, additional gambling licenses were granted to companies, and there was 5 new licenses granted at that time. And again, many companies at that time felt it was not the right move for an American company to be in Macau and to be part of the region. Sheldon Adelson, who I worked for at the time, felt very differently. He felt the opportunity was immense and could be very transitional for us as a company, but also for Macau. Macau at that time, if you haven't been there, the peninsula was the focus of the gambling world. The peninsula is a small area, very densely populated, full of casinos and some hotels. And it was the epicenter of the Macau existence, the Macau Commercial Center. And we opened up our first building in 2004. We opened the Sands Hotel right in the middle of that area. It was a small hotel, about 250 rooms, a casino, lots of restaurants, and we dipped our toe into the waters of Macau at that time. It was very successful from day one. It did very well. It was a very similar experience to most of the Macau casinos, maybe newer and maybe a little more to do, a hotel feature, but in the end, it was simply gaming centric. The seminal change from Macau and for this company came in the spring of 2007. We opened up the Venetian Macau. And for those of you who haven't been there, the Venetian Macau is very different than anything had been in that region for a long time. It looked a lot like the building you're in today. It was obviously themed. It was 3,000 sleeping rooms. It was about 1 million square foot of convention space, business center, health spa, dozens and dozens of restaurants, the finest retail shops you can imagine, and a 12,000 seat arena. And it was shocking because it wasn't on the peninsula. Sheldon had decided to wander out to Cotai, we got the land from the government of Macau. The land was basically not really land, it was water. As Sheldon liked to remark, when I got the land, I went to see it, and instead I saw landfill. I saw the opportunity to create the land, and he did. We built the Venetian starting in 2004. It opened in 2007, and people in this industry were convinced it would fail miserably. It wasn't in the epicenter. It wasn't on the Cotai. It wasn't on the peninsula, and there was great trepidation. There was a white elephant. In fact, that was the prevailing wisdom at the time. It was bold. It was huge. It was expensive. It wasn't a casino. It was a true integrated resort featuring 3,000 sleeping rooms, this massive arena, massive retail shops. People were astounded by it. The government of Macau, I took them on some tours of that building, and a lot of people just, their jaws dropped at what we built there. And the thinking was it was 10, 15 minutes outside of the peninsula, and it was just too far away. And it wasn't, the thinking at that time was gambling was the only business in Macau. Sheldon was convinced it would be fine. We had an opening night dinner. I sat with a lot of Macau dignitaries, government officials. It was quite a night. It was a seminal moment in Macau's history because that was the night Macau transitioned from a a peninsula-driven, gaming-centric town, to a full-blown, authentic resort town. And today, it's when you visit Cotai, it's astounding. It looks like there must be $50 billion of capital spent, tens of thousands of hotel rooms being constructed. It's a full-blown, authentic resort of the highest order, and attracts visitors not just from Hong Kong, but from all over the world and all over Asia. It was obvious within a year of opening that the government of Macau and LVS had made a very good decision. The rooms were busy, the retail was busy, there was demand for all the restaurants. It was quite a time. And the future Macau transitioned at that time from the peninsula to Cotai. And competitors realized that was the future. They also realized they had to build real resorts that offered real opportunities for things other business centers, convention centers, health clubs, top-tier restaurants, top-tier retail shops. We built the only large arena, but since then others have followed. And in the last 15 years, the transition of Macau to what it was, to what's become, is nothing short of astounding. In those days, when I first visited, again, it was simply you took the ferry from Hong Kong, you spent 6-7 hours and you came back. When we built the Venetian, most people thought that no one would go to Macau to sleep or to eat or to shop or to do business meetings or to spa or to spend time with their families. But that's just what's happened in the last 15 years. Today, Macau and Cotai in particular represent the best of food, architecture, leisure travel. It's a business center. It's quite a transformation. And the success we achieved has been greatly enhanced by the productive investment of the Chinese government in the transportation infrastructure projects. The investments made in the high-speed rail network throughout China are the greatest in the world and stand as an example to the rest of the world of the productivity that can be realized through thoughtful capital investment. The rail system is astounding. You haven't been there and tried it, you need to. And these investments provide robust connectivity for visitors to Macau and throughout China. The growth and modernization of the airports in Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, and Macau have been vital to the development of tourism in Macau. Other important infrastructure projects include the Hong Kong-Zhuhai Bridge, an outstanding feat of engineering if I ever saw one, which connects Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Macau, and allows for tighter integration and support of the Greater Bay Initiative. The new type of ferry terminal will provide additional opportunities post-pandemic for visitation. Macau, in a very short period of time, has transitioned to a world-class tourist destination. It took a visionary government coupled with private enterprise working together to create something which has elevated Macau on many fronts. Huge amounts of capital investment, endless opportunities for the government of Macau, endless opportunities of employment for the citizens of Macau, advanced hospitality training, and opportunity to advance. The transition of the Macau workforce is equally impressive. In any successful development, it's critical of the right employment, the right opportunities. The integrated resort business model provides careers for those without advanced education and significant upward opportunities for those with backgrounds in education and hospitality sector. These are the jobs that can make a difference in a family's life. We employ tens of thousands of people that go into a very strong family life, work life, and a very strong educational opportunity through our Adelson Center. Careers in hospitality, such as those we provide in Macau, can be the path to a middle-class life for many in Macau. Early on, our company established the Adelson Advanced Education Center for our employees to grow their hospitality knowledge and expand their employment horizons. Since 2007, we've hired over 66,000 people. More impressively, more than 12,500 team members have received promotions, and combined, our team members in Macau have received 13 million hours of training and professional development. Specific initiatives included cooperating with local educational institutions to launch talent development initiatives, such as the Sands China Manager Development Program and the Integrated Resort Business Model Analyst Program. These and other initiatives are part of the effort to support non-gaming diversification and talent development in Macau. Those employees are part of our team and make us successful in Macau. We're grateful to them, and I think they're grateful to us what we've done for them. We also recognize the need for local management in our operation. We continue to seek and build an environment which endorses local executives and management. The pride among our team is obvious when you're there. They're pleased to take leadership roles in the community. We also understand and accept our need to support the community when issues arise. When a natural disaster occurs, and many have, our team is always at the forefront, offering economic and human resources to combat the adverse conditions. We are a strong, active, and committed partner in the community. Macau represents an example of absolute success in a very short period of time. It took Las Vegas about 70 years to get to where we're at today in this town. What you see in Las Vegas started in the 50s. The Macau transformation started about 20 years ago, and the scale, diversity, and quality of the product in Macau is unparalleled. Nowhere in the world has a city made such immense strides in such a small period of time. What is the purpose of the hospitality project, which deploys significant capital and takes decades to create? Opportunity. It's opportunity for all those involved. LVS benefited, the government of Macau benefited, the people of Macau benefited greatly. Opportunity to grow a career in hospitality, to learn, to grow. The industry used to be managed by expatriates, but now the local population is continually assuming management positions. As we gather for this important dialogue, I encourage you to reflect on Macau as a case study, what can be done. Hospitality gets together, local government gets together, the people get together, create an opportunity for all involved. It only works when it works for everybody. And I think what we saw in Macau the last 20 years is an amazing case history of something I've never seen in the US, I've never seen in Europe, I've never seen in the Caribbean. It's unique to Macau, unique to Asia. It took a very visionary government. It took a capital plan developed by a company committed to Macau. It took a workforce committed to Macau. And the end result is staggering. I hope, as the ambassador alluded to, the pandemic is shortly behind us. You'll have a chance to visit what we've done in Macau and experience it for yourself firsthand. Again, thank you for all involved this evening. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the U.S. Asia Institute.
Thank you, Rob. I had the pleasure of traveling on that delegation that took members of Congress, including our next speaker, Representative Dina Titus, to Macau. And it was staggering in its scope and scale, and in how integrated it was into the community and creating jobs. So thank you, Rob. Your passion and your insight really means so much to us. And we appreciate the Las Vegas Sands Corporation and your support. I'm so pleased to have our next speaker. There she is, Representative Dina Titus. So next, Representative Titus will be speaking with us. And I'm just such a tremendous fan of hers. She represents the 1st Congressional District and serves on the Transportation and Infrastructure, Foreign Affairs, and Homeland Security Committees, as well as serving as co-chair of the Congressional Travel and Tourism Caucus, putting her at the nexus of key issues in U.S.-China relations and making her the perfect person to join us here today. Please join me in welcoming to the podium the Honorable Dina Titus. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for that kind introduction, and thank all of you for being here. As you heard, I'm the representative for Nevada's 1st District, and that is the heart of Las Vegas. So welcome to my district, all of those who are here in person, and hello to those who are watching us. We hope you can join us another time when things get back to the new normal. I want to thank the U.S. Asia Institute also for sponsoring this program and others like it that are so valuable in keeping our connections strong and helping to educate each other about our priorities and our policies. And also thank you to SANS for hosting us here in this lovely setting. You know, there's no better place to have a meeting about U.S.-Asia relations or international tourism than here in Las Vegas. We're one of the most diverse cities in the country. This is one of the most diverse districts and one of the most diverse states. We are an international city. People from all over the world live here and all over the world visit here. So this is the perfect place to be. If you look at our population also, you'll see that of the ethnic groups and the growth here, Asian Pacific Islanders are growing faster than any other demographic. They've grown over 40% in the last decade, and that is expected to continue. Just to give you some highlights of some of the Asian connections that you find here, you can go to Chinatown, which is in my district. It's really Pan-Asian, but in that one plaza, which has been mentioned as having one of the top 10 New Year's festivals in the country by the New York Times, you can find stores and also restaurants from at least a dozen different countries from all around Asia. Just earlier this year, you had the Genting Resorts opening, added to the excitement of the Strip. You've got business and gaming interests from Las Vegas represented in Macau and Singapore, and soon to be the case in Japan. Also, over 15% of the students at UNLV are Asian. That's one of the largest percentages in the country, and we are a minority serving institution. It's this diversity that makes Nevada so exciting and Las Vegas such an interesting place for me to represent. You never know what challenges will come, and they often do from all over the world. Now, I know these last 18 months have been very difficult on all of us, but especially on the travel and tourism industries, especially on communities like Las Vegas that depend on that for such a large percent of their economy. You know, we know that when the economy nationally is hit hard, we are hit harder. We're hit first, it takes longer to recover, and the impact is greater. And then having COVID has just added to that problem, because not only do people need a little money in their pocket to enjoy a holiday, but they need to know that they're going to be safe when they travel. At the height of the virus, Nevada led the country in unemployment. It was the greatest since the Depression. It has come back some now, but we are still higher than most metropolitan areas nationally. We are a resilient community, though. We have seen that time and again. We saw it after the housing crisis, after 9/11, after the oil crunch, after the shooting at Mandalay Bay. So we know that we'll recover, and we believe it'll be stronger than in the past, but it hasn't been easy. At the time we had to shut down the entire Strip, you can imagine what that looked like. Driving down on your bicycle because there were no cars. It was like a dystopian movie. It should have been in the Twilight Zone, because nobody could imagine the lights not flashing, the slot machines not working, people not being there. But one of those things that we learned from that is to be sure that in all the recovery packages, travel and tourism have a place at the table. So often the economic impact of travel and tourism is either overlooked or misunderstood or just underestimated. So every place has something that somebody wants to visit, whether it's a historical site, a natural wonder. One place in the Middle West has the world's largest ball of twine. If that's up your alley, that's where you can go. If you want the fabulous Las Vegas Strip, come to District 1. But some of the things that we did in that recovery package that were aimed at travel and tourism, I think were very important. We helped the airports and transit authorities survive with special carve-outs. We also invested in the restaurant industry so that they could keep their personnel on board. Our live entertainment areas with the shuttered venue specific funding to help them, because nobody was going to live entertainment. Also, as the chair of the Economic Development Subcommittee of the Infrastructure Committee, we were able to get for the first time funding to go directly to travel and tourism agencies in cities hit hardest. That had never been done before. That's $750 million in the competitive grants to help local travel authorities or convention centers, perhaps to advertise and say, come and visit, we're back in business. So that was an accomplishment. These critical resources too are good for getting people back, but the most important thing we know we need to do is get over the virus. And so we invested considerably in vaccine distribution. Because as I said, if people don't feel safe, if employees don't feel safe, they're not going to travel and not going to be able to have a good time. Now, we've seen the results of these investments, and I do think of them as investments, not expenditures, as a return of domestic travel. When I was flying back and forth to Washington, there'd be 2 or 3 people on a big Southwest plane from here to Baltimore. Now the planes are full. People have been shut up so long, they have this desire to get out and have a good time. And what better place to do that than in Las Vegas? So people are coming domestically, but our international travel is certainly one that we need to work on, as well as our convention business. So we're glad you're here. 2 weeks ago, the Biden administration announced that it was relaxing some of those international restrictions, and that was good news to everybody, because we know that international travelers stay longer and they spend more money, and they help us to fill those beds during the week, as well as on the weekend when we have our tourists coming from Southern California. This international tourism is really Las Vegas's growth market. It's very important that we get it back. Pre-pandemic, we were welcoming 5.5 million annual international visitors. And now we need to work on restoring that. That, accounts for roughly 15% of all of our visitors. And if you look at international travels overall, they're our nation's second largest trade export, generating over $230 billion in export income in 2019, and directly employing about 1.5 million people across the country. So it's vital for communities like Las Vegas and other tourist destinations to resume that international travel if we're really going to recover our economy. On Friday, I wrote to President Biden and said, that's great that you're opening the restrictions, but what they said is it'll be in middle November. Well, that's not a very clear-cut explanation. We need to know exactly when that's going to happen. Federal agencies need to know how to gear up to meet the new incoming travelers. Hotels need to be sure, airlines need to be sure, tour operators. So we're hoping to get a clearer number than just the middle of November for when those restrictions will be listed. On top of that, people want to travel to see their loved ones, and they won't be able to do it until those restrictions are lifted. You heard Rachel say I was also a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. In this committee, we discuss all foreign affairs, from a war to trade agreements, climate change to human rights. But it's given me an opportunity to often bring tourism to the discussion. Tourism for how it helps with our soft diplomacy, how trade agreements impact tourism, how the exchange of cultural students, art, music, dance, all the things that we do through maybe the NEA or USAID really do make a difference. And I have enjoyed that opportunity. So it's not just about the economy, but it is about strengthening our relations abroad. That's another reason that I appreciate so much the work that the U.S. Asia Institute does. They organize trips for members to visit. And there's a lot of virtual travel these days, but there's nothing the equivalent of going someplace, seeing it for yourself, tasting the food, and learning how things really are. A picture postcard of the Great Wall is just not the same as climbing it and walking it yourself. And I thank you all for doing that. I serve on the subcommittee for Asian affairs as well, and that's Asia and the Pacific and non-proliferation. And those conversations and those witnesses and things that we study in there, I think are vital to promoting peace between the U.S. and that region, security, and also prosperity. During the past administration, under President Trump, our relations with China were pretty confrontational, transactional and confrontational, and led to more tension and nearly upset the global economy. I agree with President Biden's stance that we need to recognize China not as an adversary, but as a competitor. And if we approach things in this new phase from that standpoint, it'll be interesting to see how our relationships evolve. Now, COVID, we wish were over, but it's not. We've got another variant. There may be more to come. So anything that our two countries can do to work together in conjunction to solve this medical crisis and provide humanitarian relief where necessary, I think will be great. We also need to look for other opportunities where we can find common ground and take positive steps that will benefit the global community. One of these that we hear an awful lot about is climate change, climate issues. How do we meet our goals to reduce carbon emissions and do whatever is necessary to stop these extreme weather events because of climate change? Our two nations can lead the world in fighting this threat of climate change. And I think we've made some steps in the right direction. It was really good news to hear that China was no longer funding the building of coal-fired power plants outside of China. And I think that's a good first step. The Mekong, the River Accord, we're also working on with China, is another step in that direction. Second area where we can work together is on the supply chain issues. Everywhere I go, I hear there's supply chain problems from chicken wings to Hershey bars and everything in between. We certainly hear a lot about personal protective equipment during the early days of the COVID. And now chips are the big thing. These semiconductors that you need in everything from airplanes to cars, to cell phones and to slot machines. So working together on supply chain issues, I think will be a step in the right direction. Another thing that we can have a good alliance on is North Korea. I believe there are opportunities to work together in issues facing the non-proliferation in North Korea. Fourth, Mongolia. Mongolia is celebrating its 30th year of independence from the Soviet Union, and the US and China are key economic partners for that part of the world, and we have supported the country's economic development, China through the Belt and Road and the US through import-export policies. We see that now with some of the cashmere and some of the small women-run factories and small micro economies in that area. And that's just one possibility. Fifth, certainly cybersecurity. Sixth, anti-terrorism. There are lots of possibilities for collaboration if we see each other as competitors and not adversaries. Now, there are going to be agreements where there's not issues where there's not full agreement, but perhaps we can begin to have more honest conversations. The US has concerns about what's happening in Hong Kong and Taiwan, the human rights issues for the Uyghurs, the freedom of navigation in international waters, and protection of intellectual property. Yet as someone from a community like Las Vegas that has a culture that is enriched by its Chinese population and is accustomed to welcoming Chinese visitors, I think we have a lot that we can learn from each other, and the possibility of working together is enhanced. So while we'll have differences, we know we're not going to walk away from each other. Our countries are too intertwined, and we have to work together to support certain global issues. People-to-people exchanges, I think, are an important first way to do that. That soft diplomacy, that exchange of ideas, that better understanding of culture. And forums like this certainly contribute to that goal. And I thank you again for being here, for sponsoring us, and for allowing me to come and just share a few thoughts with you tonight. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to Rachel.
You know, one thing about the pandemic is that when you see someone you haven't seen in a long time, it's so exciting. So when I saw Congresswoman Titus for the first time in 18 months, I forgot where I was in my talking points earlier tonight. So isn't it great to have her with us today? She's so knowledgeable about the travel and tourism industry and so much more. She's so knowledgeable about US-China relations and US-Asia relations. And it's just tremendous to have her here with us tonight. We thank her for that, and we thank her for joining us for this wonderful armchair discussion that will wrap up our session tonight. And so now I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Mr. Andy Aboud, and to Congresswoman Dina Titus.
Thank you. Hello again, everyone. I have to tell you right off the bat, when I'm a huge fan of Congresswoman Titus. She's a great representative for Nevada. She understands clearly the tourism industry and the hospitality industry. She has long ties to our university here, UNLV. It is intimidating to sit with a professor of Dina's status, but I'm glad to be here with you. We
Thank you,
appreciate
my
your
pleasure.
comments. Congressman Titus, you led the first CODEL that we hosted into Macau in
Yes.
2019. You've been in Las Vegas forever. You've been involved in the industry. Tell us, as someone who's been involved in Las Vegas for so long, going to Macau after all the development, what were your impressions?
Well, I have certainly seen Las Vegas grow. I came in '77, but I was actually here when Daddy was stationed at Nellis, spent my first Christmas here, and it's hard to imagine how much it's changed. Everybody is interested in my district, and they all have a story. They've been here, they want to come here, or they think they know what happens here. They believe if what happens stays here, but we tell them, no, it stays on the internet. So be careful that you don't do that. My impressions of Macau were how impressive it was. And I appreciate y'all hosting us. We wanted to visit there. It was a CODEL of other members of my caucus. It was so big and so massive on such a small area. And it was all created out of whole cloth, built on a sand spit that was built first, that didn't exist before that. And it was amazing with the infrastructure that could serve that kind of area. A second thing that struck me was the way gaming was conducted. Here, people are having a good time. They're hollering at the dice, they're drinking, they're partying, they're falling in love. Over there, it's strictly business. Many people across a giant floor, a silence. You could hear a pin drop. It was very much all about the gaming and not about the party. No drinking, everybody just kind of having tea and water, and you could tell the difference in the feel. While we were there, though, we also visited with some of the political leaders, and it was interesting to hear them talk about one country, two systems. But really, it was three systems because it was Macau, Hong Kong, and mainland China. But the politics were pretty interesting to observe. And finally, we went over to the old Portuguese section of the old town of Macau, and that was a great contrast to what Macau had been like and what it was now.
Very good. You believe you're involved in securing one of the first direct flights between Las Vegas and Beijing.
Yes.
Can you tell us how that unfolded and why that was so important, and maybe the hopes that will come back again?
We absolutely hope it'll come back. I've long tried to get Las Vegas to be the spot where we have direct international flights. And that was one that was very exciting. We worked with a number of different people to get that flight. The industry weighed in. We worked with the convention center. We worked with the Asian Chamber, all to make a pitch of why that would be both prosperous and advantageous to both ends of the flight. And we were glad that it was working. We had a great celebration and a ribbon cutting, and you saw a number of people coming. Like I said, China was really the growth market, and so we were glad to see people here. And it was also good for business travelers as well. And we hope it comes back, and you've seen other international flights to parts of Europe and other parts of Asia kind of follow that pattern.
Good. And we're also going to take questions from the crowd. At any point anyone has a question, we're also taking questions virtually, so please raise your hand so you can ask any questions if you have them. You are co-chair of the Travel and Tourism Caucus, and you have the most iconic district in America and the foremost travel and tourism destination. For people that are out there watching, understanding the true impact of hospitality and tourism, I don't think they sometimes fully understand the economic benefit of it. Can you share with everyone a little bit the impact that travel and tourism has on your district, and particularly small businesses?
Yes, I do have a very interesting district. You know, we have the largest employer, the big gaming casinos, and the smallest employer, a taco truck. We have a large Hispanic population, and I mentioned the large Asian population. In those two communities, you have a lot of small family-run businesses, and they provide ancillary services to what happens on the Strip. You know, I say here in my district, you can ride the world's largest Ferris wheel, or depending on what happens while you're here, you can get married at a drive-through wedding chapel with a mechanical arm that throws rice on your windshield. So it goes from one extreme to the other. Certainly, so many of it, people in hospitality lost jobs during that time we closed down. As I mentioned, we had the highest unemployment rate in the country. But, you know, we don't make anything here except dreams come true. So we have to import everything. And we depend on those ancillary businesses, whether they are restaurants or florists or laundries, to help to be sure that a facility like this can keep the lights on. So having those loans and grants through economic development and from the federal government made a huge difference for those small businesses. And now they're coming back. Also, that unemployment money for small businesses kept some folks in jobs, or at least available to come back for jobs. Now the problem is finding people to work now that we've had a year and a half of people being at home. But again, people, we always want to have gaming and tourism at the table when decisions about infrastructure are made, or economic development, workforce training, because too often around the country, you've got tourism tied to gaming in every country but two. And maybe they have a riverboat, or maybe they have an Indian casino, but they don't have something as massively part of the economy as in Las Vegas. So people come to me for questions about how does it work and what should we do so that we're not just moving products, we're also moving people.
Very good. What impact do you see the infrastructure bill working its way through Congress having on tourism and maybe transportation in your district and more broadly?
Well, right now it's kind of a mess in Congress, if y'all have been following it, to put it that's politely. The House passed a really great infrastructure bill. I thought it was called Invest in USA. And it was a pretty expansive investment bill in mass transit, in high-speed trains, in environmental issues. Now, the Senate put together their own bill, and that was put together not by experts in transportation, but by a bipartisan committee that appointed themselves to come up with something, and that's all we could get, so that's what we're stuck with. Nonetheless, it's got some good provisions in it to move our infrastructure forward. It's got internet connections for rural Nevada, some investment in speed trains, but not as much as I had hoped, and some environmental policies. That has passed the Senate and is sitting in the House. That's the physical infrastructure. The human infrastructure is the bigger bill that's being considered through reconciliation, and that's investments in child care, family leave, education, health care, those kind of things, investing in people. That's the one that's more challenging. The two need to go together, and hopefully we'll see that happen before the end of October. Specifically for transportation, though, for tourist areas, one good thing in the bill is that there will be a special person in the Department of Transportation designated as the secretary's kind of go-to person and expert on travel and tourism. I think that's very important. There's also a provision for competitive funding for programs of regional significance. That's helpful for us in the Southwest because all the emphasis up to now has pretty much been Amtrak in the Northeast, and we need to connect our communities in the Southwest too. For Las Vegas, the funding that we can get for a new I-11 between here and Phoenix is critical. We're the only two metropolitan areas in the country not connected by an internet. That will help with tourism. And I believe strongly that a super speed train would be great. I've been working on this for a long time. And this also ties to international tourism because everywhere else in the world, people are used to riding the train, except in the US. If we could get a super speed train from here to Southern California, more tourists would take it, and I-15 wouldn't just be like a parking lot on the weekends.
Very good. You obviously have had long ties with UNLV, and they have an outstanding hospitality program.
yes.
So is here. How important are our universities in the hospitality program, and what role can they play in other places in the world?
Well, I think we're the best in the country because we have a living lab right there for so many people to put what they learn in the classroom to work. We also have a number of scholarships that are offered by the industry, as well as internships, which are extremely valuable, and a lot of exchange students. One of the things I mentioned was that we are a minority serving institution, and that diversity adds to what we have to offer. And it's so refreshing to see so many of those young people who are the first in their families to go to college. And if you talk to them a little bit, you find that many of their families are working back of the house so their children can work in the front of the house. And so I think our program is great. We work with the dean of the college. I know you do internships. I know you do foreign exchanges. We have a very active USAC foreign exchange program. All of those are very valuable.
Very good. You know, you've been to Macau, and you've also been to China. How did your experience visiting China color your view of the relationship between the two countries? You said earlier that things have gotten tense. There's a lot of rhetoric, harsh rhetoric going on between the two countries. And we have found that a lot of people that are most critical have never been to China
That's awesome.
and seen the people and experienced it, and feel that the relationship between the two countries, between people to people exchanges, is quite warm. How did that impact your impression? And then touch on that, what should American businesses and people be doing when they see this harsh rhetoric that can be detrimental between the two countries?
Well, you know, you're right. We too often equate people's attitudes towards each other with people's attitudes towards governments. Now, you've seen that with the US and the ugly American abroad, and with people not liking the French because they're so rude. You get there, you don't find that's the case at all if you have good personal relations. And that was certainly true in China. Glenn made us go to many, many meetings, I can tell you. So we met with all kind of political leaders from top to bottom. In fact, we were in Hong Kong as the riots were starting and the barricades were going up. And so we got a good view of the politics. But we also saw the absolutely fascinating things, historical and natural, that the country had to offer, and ate incredible food. But I think there's no substitute for sitting down, looking somebody in the eye and breaking bread with them. That's the first step towards diplomacy. There were a few disagreements of the things that I mentioned that we're never going to be quite on the same page with, but it was all civil, and relationships were developed that we have followed up on for the exchange of information. And that's very helpful when you're a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Very good. And do we have any questions from the crowd? Don't be shy.
It's like my students, sit in the back of the room, hope I don't call on you.
Anything virtually? Any other questions? Here's a question. Tourism from China has been critical to the success of Las Vegas. What can we do? Oh, I lost it. I think it's what can we do to, I think what it's saying there is, what can we do to promote Chinese visitors coming to Las Vegas?
Well, I think that information exchanges are great, and there's a program that the U.S. has that's not funded by government, but is funded by fees on visas that help to advertise the U.S. around the world, Brand USA, to let people know kind of what we have. So we shouldn't be shy about kind of promoting that. But you've got to have a good experience. Your holiday or your business trip starts the minute you leave home and go to the airport. So we've got to be able to accommodate those travelers. One of the things that we did when we got the airline here to help with that business was to get the visa time extended for visas to China. So you didn't have to renew them so often. You could renew them every 10 years. That was a big help, things like that. But when somebody lands here, you got to be sure that we've got the customs agents, the TSA, enough resources and people to make the entry into the country an easier thing. You don't want to have to go and stand in line for 4 hours before you ever get out of the airport, because that's what you're going to remember when your trip is over. Another thing that I've been pushing is for TSA to be sure that all the signs in the airport accommodate different languages. It's hard enough to deal in an airport in a foreign country when you think you might be able to speak the language, or you can at least read the letters. But for Chinese, that's a bigger challenge. So to kind of accommodate some of that, have more of the public signage in the languages of other people who you hope will visit and have a good experience.
That's great. Another virtual question here. You mentioned in your keynote remarks the multiple opportunities and issues where you think the U.S. and China can work together. How do you think people-to-people exchange or the cultural understanding through travel and hospitality between our two countries can help strengthen trust and more productive engagement to foster collaboration to address those issues you alluded to earlier?
Well, ignorance is often the enemy when you're trying to get something done, whether it's ignorance of your own history or ignorance of someone else's culture. So when you have student exchanges, and some of them are in the hospitality industry, some are in history, some are can be in, we have a lot of scientist students who are studying this in this country. Those kind of exchanges, I think, are very valuable. All those people are going to go home eventually. They're going to write to their family and friends. They're going to spread the word about the place where they've been, whether it's their direction or our direction. So I think that kind of exchange and that kind of sharing, what could be better than that? And how can that be negative if the kind of the overall attitude is one of a positive one of appreciation, I guess is the right word.
Very good. Any questions from the crowd? Yes, Mr. Keelan.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for spending so much time in your leadership, particularly on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I did have a follow-up to one of Andy's questions and also Rob's points on how well the Macau government coordinated with private industry. And my question is, how can city, state, municipal, federal government work better with private industry to promote tourism in the U.S., but also careers in tourism?
Well, for careers in tourism, I think we have to work through universities to provide scholarships or promote programs that encourage those initial internships that then lead to someone to go into the business. You know, more and more schools are now offering those kinds of programs. You know, we had Syracuse and UNLV, those are kind of the top two, but you find them in other places as well. You also have to remember, though, it doesn't always take a college degree to be involved in tourism. Some of the workforce development programs at the community colleges, well, you can be a chef and be involved in tourism, for example. So we need to kind of think outside the box. An interesting program that they have at UNLV is a combination of art and engineering. Now that's a place where a lot of the students who go into producing shows on the Strip major. You don't find that at every school, but what a smart thing to have, because if you've been to any show lately, you can see how much it's about design as well as engineering. Same thing is true for slot machines and design of games. It's a lot about science, but it's also a lot about art. So thinking outside the box with universities, I think, is valuable. Local governments, you know, that I don't know exactly how they can be more involved in encouraging people to go into tourism, but certainly the city of Las Vegas has a great relationship with the industry. In fact, they like to claim part of the industry that's not really in the city, but it's in the county. So you see some of that. I think that in Congress, we have a gaming caucus, and we have a travel and tourism caucus, and we have caucuses for about every country or every part of the world. If we could figure out some ways for us to be more collaborative and work together, you might find that instead of silos, we really could get more done through that kind of effort. State legislatures, you all are probably don't lobby very much, and yet you probably should, because you need to remind legislators just how much you contribute to the economy, how many jobs you create, how much money you bring in, how much taxes and tribal revenues you provide. That's kind of an untold story, and I think that would be helpful.
Very good. Good points. Another question from the crowd? Anyone? Aaron?
Congressman, thanks for being here with us today. The Senate passed a bill, as you know, in June on competitiveness with China, bipartisan vote, but still has some work to do. I know the House has been holding some hearings and working on some additional issues related to what can be done to help with competitiveness. You know, semiconductor is a huge issue, is one that they're trying to address with that investment in U.S. resources to try and be competitive on the global market, particularly with China. You know, what are some of the things that you see Congress being able to do, and what is pretty significant gridlock in town now, and with all the other issues you mentioned that you're working on? What do you see over the next maybe year, 14 months that you all can do to be helpful in that area?
Well, it used to be that politics and partisanship ended at the water's edge. And anytime you were dealing around the world, you put those partisan feelings aside and you represented the United States. That's not as true anymore as it used to be, unfortunately. You see that in relations with Israel, how Israel used to be a bipartisan issue. There was no question about it. And now that has gotten to be more partisan. Same is true with China. China is sometimes used as a football for one side to accuse the other of being soft on something or too hard on something, or having a financial policy of embargoes that hurts one industry or another. The Senate has passed, or has come out of committee, I think, a bill that deals with U.S. competitiveness vis-a-vis China. The House committee has also passed one. The acronym is EAGLES. I can't remember exactly what that stands for. If you look at those two bills side by side, the one in the House allows for much more cooperation. We still maintain our competitive edge, but the one coming out of the Senate is more antagonistic towards China. So that will require some work. So any input that y'all have, I certainly appreciate your wise counsel as we move those forward and make perhaps they'll both pass their respective houses and try to come with some compromise.
Very good. I think, did we have another virtual question that I saw pop up? I want to make sure we get all the questions out. Anything else from the crowd?
Well, I have a question for you. What would you recommend that I take back to the subcommittee on foreign affairs as we move forward in trying to deal with some of these relations? You know, it was a time when we were pulling back, and those last 4 years, we were very much kind of abandoning our leadership role. And as we did that in many countries in Asia and even in Eastern Europe, Russia moved in politically and China moved in economically. You see China building ports in Lima as well as Sri Lanka. How do we compete, get back in that business without being too adversarial? I welcome your advice.
So if I can opine on that, I have to say, you know, I think that, and you can see it, that Americans are worn out from tension.
Yeah.
And that nothing is solved. We learned this when we had the dialogue in Nebraska on agriculture, and this, we're going to do one on sustainability. There's nothing, as you would know, nothing is solved with less communication.
Yeah.
And so the importance of policymakers in Washington, D.C. and businesses standing up to the plate and talking about the importance of this relationship between the United States and China is critical. And I think nothing is better exemplified by that than tonight. I mean, what a fantastic and informative speaker Congresswoman Titus has been. And this, her remarks and the dialogue we just had is exactly why we worked with the U.S. Asia Institute to do this, is because there's not enough communication like this. It's very rhetorically driven. And so we want to thank you for your leadership role and your insights and your expertise. And we are very fortunate to have you as a representative from Nevada, and wish you the best of luck.
Well, thank you. And thank you for sponsoring us. And thank you to the U.S. Asia Institute for all the good work you did. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
I'm such a big fan. What a great discussion. We covered so many topics. Thank you for everyone in the audience for your questions. Thank you for the virtual questions. Thank you to Congresswoman Titus for doing double duty, giving us a keynote address and sitting on a panel for us. And thank you, Andy, for a wonderful job moderating that discussion. That was really terrific. Wow, what a great first session. As incredible as today was, I'm just as excited for tomorrow's session. Thank you for joining us for our first day of the U.S.-China Regional Dialogue on Hospitality, Tourism, and Cultural Exchange. For those of you joining us virtually, we hope to see you again tomorrow. which will kick off with keynote remarks from former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright at 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's noon Eastern time, and that's 9 p.m. Beijing time. We look forward to resuming our virtual journey then. Thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow.